Let's bring in Republican Senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton, to get his reaction to what's going on the border and beyond. And if you couldn't see the video, you may remember the moment there, Senator, that now Vice President Harris raised her hand that this should be decriminalized, crime across the border. Today, President Biden said, "I can think of no one better qualified to handle what's going on at the border." Can you think of anyone better qualified?
Almost anyone would be better qualified than Kamala Harris. She can barely organize a one-car funeral. As you said, she said that she would decriminalize illegal border crossings during the campaign. She also, recall, compared immigration and custom enforcement officers to the KKK. So no, this is not going to solve our border crisis. But in the end, it doesn't matter if Kamala Harris or Alejandro Mayorkas at Homeland Security or anyone else is designated by Joe Biden. It's the Biden border crisis because Joe Biden is the one who eliminated the very effective policies and the agreements in place with countries like Mexico and Guatemala that sparked this border crisis.
You have heard the statements, as we all have in recent days and recent weeks, that it is a crisis, even though we're not using the word crisis, they're not using the word crisis. Whatever the situation is at the border, however you want to term it, they say it was an inherited problem. The surge began before President Biden was sworn in, and this is left over from the last administration.
Yeah, nothing could be farther from the truth, Shannon. But I have heard the Democrats use that talking point over and over again. Dismantle. That's the word they always use, that Donald Trump had dismantled the immigration system. That's simply false. Joe Biden is the one that dismantled the highly effective policies that created this crisis. There are three of those policies in particular. One was the public health exclusionary order that said in the middle of a pandemic, we're not going to let people enter our country. Joe Biden created an exception for minors, and guess what? We have a lot of minors at our border now. Second was the so-called Remain in Mexico policy. If you got to our border and you had an asylum claim, you had to remain in Mexico. You didn't just get released into the country on your own recognizant and hope that you return to your hearing 18 months from now. And third was the so-called safe third country agreement, especially with Guatemala. If you left your country and you're seeking asylum, you have to seek asylum in the first country through which you pass, oftentimes Guatemala. Those three policies had effectively closed our border last year. Joe Biden eliminated them, and we have the Biden border crisis now.
Let's turn domestically here. The House has passed a sweeping bill that would, in many ways, give the federal government a say over how state elections are carried out, despite what the Constitution says about that. But Democrats say there's a lot of scaremongering about it. That's not accurate. Here's what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says about what is now Senate Bill 1.
We're going to hear that this bill, gasp, register Americans to vote, is a Democratic power grab. We're going to hear that it's a federal takeover of our elections. Opponents of voting rights throughout history have always said, leave it to the states. Just leave it to the states to discriminate against African Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, younger Americans in college.
With respect to a lot of the state legislation that is going on, Stacey Abrams, a very prominent Democrat leader, says this: the new term of art is election integrity. She says, but it is a laughable word or phrase to use. It is designed based on anything but a question of integrity. The truth of the matter is there is no voter fraud. So Democrats say what they have passed and what is now pending before the Senate will clean up the mess, and that efforts by Republicans to do so at the state level is voter suppression.
Yeah, you know, Shannon, the Democrats call this law the For the People Act. It should be called the For the Corrupt Democratic Politicians Act because it's designed to entrench the Democrats in power. Look at some of the more radical proposals. They want to turn the Federal Election Commission into a partisan commission so the Democrats can have a majority on that commission and basically outlaw Republican campaigns. They want to provide taxpayer funding of elections. They want your tax dollars to go to fund candidates who you oppose, sometimes in the strongest possible terms. They want to mandate the kind of reckless and untested and risky practices that so many states used last year, like mandatory ballot harvesting, where one person can go door to door and pick up thousands of ballots, a practice that is so risky, Shannon, that an entire congressional election was invalidated just 2 years ago. Election that Republicans won, by the way. These are the kind of radical proposals that Democrats are hoping to leverage a slender majority and then entrench themselves in power forever. The American people oppose this bill, and we will not let it pass in the United States Senate.
I want to ask you quickly about something we were tipped off to tonight. Christopher Rufo says in a tweet, he's got a scoop on something you're working on. He says that you're going to introduce legislation tomorrow to ban critical race theory from the United States military. The bill would prohibit the armed forces from promoting the ideas of race essentialism, collective guilt, and neo-segregation. Anything more you want to tell us about that?
Shannon, I will be introducing legislation. Our armed forces should not be endorsing or recommending or requiring for training any of this left-wing nonsense that suggests that any race is inherently inferior or racist or oppressive, or that our country or our founding documents like the Constitution or the Declaration are inherently racist or oppressive. When young men and women raise their hand and take the oath to join our military, they should know that they are fighting for a great and noble nation. That's why I'm introducing this legislation. I want to make sure that all of our young troopers are trained to love their country and to defend the country that they love so much.
Well, we thank you and the millions of other men and women in this country who have worn that uniform and served us selflessly. Thank you, Senator. Good to see you.
Thank you, Shannon.